Hello and welcome to the final episode of 2022 of Pakistanis. My name is Uzair Yunus, and to do the roundup with me, Ariba Shahid is here. She's a familiar voice person to many of you, been on the podcast many times. Ariba says or claims that she may have a viral flu,
Yeah.
but she's a smart woman who is not smart enough to get a COVID test to make sure that she does not have COVID. But Ariba, you said you can smell Vicks. So that's your scientific way of analyzing and knowing that you don't have the coronavirus.
Thank you for having me, Uzair. And okay, so my logic is मैं घर पे तो हूँ. I'm not going anywhere. And my parents are already sick. So you know what? Let's just have a fam jam at home for, 2 weeks.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Like I have no New Year's plans, so it doesn't
yeah.
matter.
So that doesn't matter. And Ariba was basically hanging out with some very elite people a couple of days ago. So my logic is कि जो बीमारी है वो अमीरों से ही लगती है तो कोई बीमारी अपने साथ घर लेके आ गई है लेकिन कोरोना है कि नहीं ये उन्होंने अभी तक टेस्ट नहीं कराया है.
I think ये भी हो सकता है कि वो बाहर सर्दी बहुत थी. Like we were sitting outside. So it was either that, maybe.
और वैसे भी आई मीन दिसंबर में आई मीन लाहौर इज मच वर्स देन एनी प्लेस
Yeah, but
एल्स
like
राइट
in
नाउ.
Karachi, we're not prepared now. We wear lawn everywhere.
We're not, I mean, I was also saying like not only just the weather getting cold, but with the change of
The
weather
smog.
and then the smog, Karachi
Yeah.
also gets pretty bad, not as bad as Lahore. तो मुझे हमेशा याद है कि पिछले कई सालों से दिसंबर में पेरेंट्स से कि फ्लू चल रहा है, वायरल चल रहा है. हम लाइक वायरल नहीं चल रहा, हवा खराब है आपकी और आप सबका गला खराब हो रहा है क्योंकि आप फ्री की सिगरेट्स पी रहे हैं बेसिकली हर रोज.
Yes. Yes, yes. I mean, beach पे it was so bad before the weather changed. Okay, I bought my pure air purifier, my humidifier stopped working, and I had to get it done because I couldn't breathe at home. Like it was really bad in Karachi, and it was apparently much worse in Lahore. So I'm just wondering how everyone struggled there.
Yeah, but see, I mean, that's the powers that be can claim कि हम आपको फ्री के सिगरेट्स दे रहे हैं ताकि आपको अपने पैसे
Passive
खर्च ना करना
smoking.
पड़े. Exactly. But this episode is about the roundup of the year. I figured that we have Ariba on to talk about the big hits, the big misses, the things that happened in this year and what the next year may look like. I think from my point of view, Ariba, obviously the year started with the pandemic and is ending with the pandemic in the sense that Omicron is
Yeah.
here and there's a fear that cases are rising. They're rising here where I am in the US. So to everyone tuning in, I hope you stay safe, that your loved ones stay safe. It's still going on and we need to be careful. But tell us, what was your sort of, when you look back at January 2021, where were things and where did you see them going? What were some of the key points that you said, you know what, things may be getting good? We'll get to the where things started to go awry because they did, but what was your initial sort of, good momentum building story?
So I think when 2021 started and when we did our last, sum up of the year, I think we all agreed on the fact that everything is going not as bad as it should have during a pandemic, but inflation is something that needs to be targeted and something that is, of utmost importance. And we started the year saying, bus abhi agar inflation ko kabu kar le and things will go well. And then the next month we said the same thing, and the next month, and the next month, and it's December now, and we're still saying the same thing, inflation ko kabu karna hai, which ab nazar nahi aa raha. So I'm not going to start off saying that 2022 is the year that we're going to control inflation. We may or may not. That is not up for debate, I guess. But so that is what we started off with. Things were going pretty well considering the fact that during the pandemic, the country was able to sustain itself. We didn't go bankrupt. Hum band nahi ho gaye. Everything was going well. In fact, we registered a 4% growth rate in the year. मतलब मजाक से हट के wow, right? So things weren't bad. Like things were, so I don't know, maybe I'm not a pessimist yet, but like I wouldn't say that things are terribly bad in 2021. Like, do you agree with me? Like, it could have been much worse considering we're in Pakistan.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I try to grapple with this argument a lot, in the sense that, inflation is obviously there and we've had problems with it for a long, long time. And that's eroding purchasing power parity. But even that number does not, in my view, tell the story of the crisis. And I think people like you and I often miss that story of a long, drawn out crisis, which is, and I think Khurram Hussain wrote powerfully in his final Dawn column about this. And that made me think as well, in the sense that we are a country that is nuclear armed, $300+ million coming into startups. Some of the most talented people I know in the world are Pakistani, et cetera, et cetera. But many of our human development indicators are actually worse than, if not equal to, sub-Saharan African countries. And nothing, I'm not throwing shade on African nations. I'm just reflecting on the fact that sub-Saharan Africa has had a terrible history of colonial extraction, a terrible history of violence, of collapsing states, and all of that. So its indicators have been terribly bad. And Pakistan's indicators were not that bad. Yeah, we've gotten to that point. And I think in our discourse, we often look at 4% growth or new investment coming in or CPEC, et cetera. But we miss that very tragic human story that millions of Pakistanis go through, frankly, who you and I can't even relate to, forget about see. Right? Karachi, mein, okay, you still see some slums, et cetera. But I still remember this when I was in Pakistan last and went to interior Sindh. It had been a long time since I had gone to rural Sindh. And it was surprising to me that when you walked through the bazaar in Sindh, you didn't see a lot of fresh vegetables. And I
Yeah.
asked somebody, right, it looks weird, like kya scene hai? And they were like saying, हाँ, गुर्बत है, लोग वो सब्जी नहीं afford कर सकते, तो बाजार में आपको इतनी सब्जी मिलेगी भी नहीं. So that's the story to me that at least says that we need to pay more attention to that when it comes to talking about the economy as well.
Yeah, of course. And like when you said CPEC, the protests that we're seeing in Gavalar itself, you can't put that into numbers when you talk about CPEC and you talk about the multiplier effect it has on the GDP of the country or employment or whatever. You're not taking into account those stories. When we talk about inflation, we're not taking into account the shrinkflation that's happening. So the inflation numbers are understated in comparison to what they essentially are in ground reality. And you're not taking into account the fact that families are considering what is important, what is not important when deciding how to spend their money. And of course, I realize that Pakistan's been a country jahan pe inflation numbers have usually been high. Like I don't feel that there has been a time where a reporter walks on the street and asks people whether they think that there is Mengai or not, and people were happy with it. I don't think there was a time. But you've got to agree with the fact that it has been consistent for the past 2 years. One issue has been consistent, and that is the problem, where every month you see that the inflation numbers are clocking in around, hovering towards the two digit mark, sometimes in 2 digits, sometimes almost there. And that is scary considering the number of people that live below the poverty line in Pakistan. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
but let me push back. I agree that inflation has been, excuse me, has been an issue for the last 2 years. But I was actually looking at World Bank data, and last year, this is even before the most recent round of inflation, right? And I was looking at Pakistan compared to peer economies like Morocco, Nigeria, Vietnam, Bangladesh, India, etc. And it was a shocking revelation, and I think I've posted about this on social media and other articles as well, that since the turn of the century, for the last 20 years, Pakistan, among its peer economies, has had the lowest rate of annual growth on average, and the second highest average rate of inflation.
Yeah,
So it's not just that there is inflation now, it's been there for the last 20 plus years. And it's not, high rates of inflation in emerging markets are totally normal, right? I mean,
yeah,
not double digit, but, 7, 8%. But that, if it's not followed with growth, that really is the problem. And I think the UNDP earlier this year released a report that showed that, based on their analysis, Pakistan actually is the only country in the subcontinent with a shrinking middle class.
Yeah.
which is terrifying. Like you shouldn't, a young country like ours, where the median age is under 25, should not have a shrinking middle class. It should have a growing middle class, but for some reason we do, and that's the crisis in my view.
And it's not like the middle class is shrinking and the poor are increasing, the rich are increasing. That would be brilliant. That would
Yeah.
be ideal.
Yeah, if people are
But
moving up, that away
yeah,
from the middle class into the elite. Yeah, exactly. So, but going
yeah,
back to the year, I think you're right. It started with optimism. 4% growth was good.
yeah,
And I think exports are rebounding. And the fact of the matter is that, again, when you compare Pakistan's exports through the pandemic, like January 2020 to today, we've done as well as India has in terms of growing our exports, and better than Bangladesh. So it's good. We're growing at
yeah.
you. This would indicate that exports are strong, and the rebounding is there's strength there. But it hasn't been followed by rejuvenation in other sectors of the economy. And I think you would agree that that's where the problem lies, right? That the broad-based type of growth hasn't really taken hold the way it should have.
Yeah, so if we look at it this way, in Pakistan, like if you want to increase your exports, if you want to increase your domestic sales, at the end of the day, you're going to be increasing your imports because one, we're not a completely self-sustained country. I don't think any of our industries are self-sustaining, locally sustained. I don't think any of them are. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Um, so the growth that we have comes at a cost, and that is the question as in how long one can bear the cost. Is like how long can you support these industries? How long can these industries cost you? And that is one question that I often have in the sense that, let's say, cars. So we hear the governor of state bank, we hear the spokesperson talk about motorcycle and car sales being increased, and that being used as a metric to show how there's more purchasing power in the country. But at the end of the day, you should know that when more of these cars are being sold or produced in Pakistan, you're importing more products from abroad. You're importing more raw materials from abroad. Um, sorry. So those are some things that I don't know, like until unless our industries don't become self-sufficient, I don't think we would be able to compete in exports as effectively as the rest of the world. Of course, exports increasing right now, that's a good sign. And the momentum, for the momentum to grow rapidly, one would require more made in Pakistan, and more, openness towards competition. Because the more you protect these industries, the less likely they are to be able to compete in the long run. So that is one concern I have. But yeah, as far as exports are concerned, it's good that Pakistan's relying on more than just remittances from people like you,
Mm.
and we're going for exports. But I would love to see exports in different domains, like beyond textiles, beyond agriculture, beyond textiles. I don't know, like beyond, oh, and then software. So that's good. Like tech exports are good, but I'd love to see that grow more.
Yeah.
And and then you can't have tech exports grow when you have duties on laptops. So there's that as well. So yeah, I don't know. If you want to increase exports, sorry, or if you want to increase the growth of the country, you've got to look at things from a bigger, wider lens. And you've got to see at what cost that growth is coming and how long you can sustain yourself with that cost.
Yeah, I think the point on laptops is valid, right? I think there's no new taxes coming under the mini budget, which we'll get to in just a moment. But I think you're right on, even the data point about motorcycles and cars, and motorcycle sales have also been booming. It's like there is no public transport in this country, decent one. There's like, okay, there's a BRT here and there, but by and large, if you want mobility, and mobility is linked to economic opportunity, you got to figure out your own way to get
Think
around
about it this
places.
way. Think about it this way. I live near IBA, Karachi University, and NED, the three biggest universities in Karachi. And the bus system that they've developed for Karachi does not link to these universities. So um, getting a bus to university should be the first goal. The second goal should be to workplaces, hubs like Chandrika, things of the sort. let's say if I do not have a car and I want to use the public transport in a city like Karachi, I can't really do that as effectively as one would hope. Uh, I'm not really sure about the Lahore and Islamabad system, but I've heard that the areas they cover are limited in reach. So mass transport is citywide. You can't just pick and choose areas and then just stop and go like, listen, we've given you a gift. Because no, you haven't given me a gift.
सब्सिडीज दे
This
रहे हैं
is
उस
your
पे
job.
आपको.
आप ये नहीं, और फिर रोड बनाना या कुछ भी बस भी लाना is not a gift. Like subsidy तो चलो, you can spin that, but like it's not a gift. It's my basic right as a tax-paying citizen. Even if I'm not paying tax, it's a basic right. And then if I'm buying a motorcycle because one, I can't afford a car, two, I can't afford to rickshaw into work every day. That is why motorcycle sales are increasing. It's not because I have a lot of money, it's because I saved every penny I made for the past few months to buy a
Yeah.
motorcycle so I could get to work and earn money.
Yeah. No, my driver in Karachi has a motorcycle because that's his only way of conveniently getting to and from work. And if he had the opportunity to have a decent bus that he could get into, I'm pretty sure that he would not use his motorcycle because rising petroleum prices eat into his salary a lot,
I'll
right?
give you an example. I'll give you an example. When I went to IBA, so there was a shuttle service that ran from main campus to city campus, right? I had my own car, but as a student, I was broke all the time. I'd rather spend that money on something else. So what I would do is I'd park my car at main campus, take the shuttle to city campus. When I was done with my class, take the shuttle back, and then ride back home. And you know, me being for someone from a privileged background, thought the public transport was a more effective way. One, I don't have to worry about traffic. Two, it doesn't cost me anything. So your driver being driver being someone who wants to save, that's different. This is what it's supposed to be like. The middle class are also supposed to use public transport. It's not just for the people that can't afford it. It's supposed to be mass transport, and that is the only way you're going to reduce smog.
Yeah.
आप 3 दिन offices बंद करके smog नहीं कम करोगे.
And just for context for people, I'm privileged enough to be sitting here in Washington. There's actually 6 bus lines within 2 blocks of me, right, that can take me to the city, right? And the
Wow.
fare in DC is $2 a pop, right? So 180
उजैर,
का अगर
आपको ज्यादा रेमिटेंस भेजना चाहिए शराफत
हाँ,
से.
exactly. भेज रहे हैं भाई. But that's just the context, right? That I have a car here, but more often than not, I can just walk over to the intersection and hop on a bus that can take me to anywhere in the city. And this is not even a large city per se. And yes, there is a
Yeah.
subsidy provided for the transportation system,
Did they
as it
tell you
is
it's a
in many
gift?
parts of the world. No,
Did they tell you it's a gift?
and actually, there are plans here to make the bus free because the city is arguing that that's actually a better solution to transportation and better walkability, mobility, etc. So there's a debate going on around even reducing fares for the bus and the mass transit system. But it again, connecting this back to economics is important because
Yeah.
this is how productivity goes up, right? So if you are having a driver that whose job it is to basically sit while you're in the office and drive you from point A to point B, that is unproductive labor. Sitting there,
Yeah.
not doing anything productive. You are stuck in traffic because there is urban sprawl and no mass transit system. That is a drain on productivity. If you are
Yeah.
forcing people to commute like donkeys essentially in crowded buses that are terrible to sit in, and then expect them to show up in the factory and then be productive, they're not going to be productive. So that's a drain on your labor productivity. So if your labor productivity and your total factor productivity in economic terms is not going up compared to the rest of the world, which is investing in better transportation and mobility and productivity, then your cost is never going to match to the ones that are more productive than you. And therefore your exports are
True.
never going to grow. You're always going to import. I think that's what is important for people to recognize, that the ability to move people around in a country or in a city is so vital. And we haven't even touched upon how farm to market roads are essential to improving loss
Yeah.
of product and produce from the farm to the city, which is also another big issue in this country.
Women mobility is also another issue in the country where a lot of women don't pick up jobs because one, it would cost them around 6,000 rupees just to get a rickshaw driver to pick them up from their home and drop them to work, or a bus service or van service that costs them around 6,000. So in a country where the minimum wage is around 20,000, and not everyone is fortunate enough to earn big money. आप अपनी सैलरी का 1/4 उठा के सिर्फ ट्रांसपोर्टेशन पे लगाए तो फिर उससे बेहतर people को like what, just stay at home, just
Which
stay
again,
at
I
home.
think is such an important point right now. Again, I want to connect this to basic economics because people miss this point. When you're
Yeah,
spending 6,000 a month on a rickshaw driver or your transportation because there is no better option, there are two things that happen when we look at the big picture numbers in the economy that, old school economists say you are consuming too much because 80% of your GDP or 90% of your GDP is consumption. It's consumption spending because of things like this. You're
yes,
spending 6,000 rupees on a rickshaw driver because you can't afford,
yeah,
there's no better alternative. Number two, that 6,000 rupees then of consumption spending works its way through the economy as consumption spending. The rickshaw driver is an unproductive laborer because they're working in the services industry instead of
yeah,
making things in the country. So that adds to it. But more importantly, if you had a better option, then you would be saving part of that 6,000, which then is the domestic savings and investment gap in this country that
yeah,
people often macroeconomists talk about. And I think we forget to connect micro level issues with macro level impact because all these things
absolutely.
add up. There are millions of people spending 6,000 rupees on rickshaw or 10,000 rupees a month on motorcycle fuel expenditure is the consumption spending. And they're not doing it because they love to ride a bike or ride in a rickshaw. They're doing it because there is no other opportunity to go around
There
the
is no,
place.
exactly. And then calling the country a consumption-based country. Of course, we are a consumption-based country because at the end of the day, people have to fulfill their needs more than their wants. So I feel that when you talk to the majority of the country, their money goes towards their needs, and it's just a few of us that spend more towards our wants.
Yeah.
And I
I
I,
think
I find that important
Amar
fact.
made this point on Twitter the other day that if you just even look at a dal fry that a laborer eats the
Yeah,
dhaba, 85% of that dal fry or 90% of that dal fry, roughly speaking, is imported. Because दाल
yeah,
भी imported है, palm oil भी imported है, तो दो major components जो हैं दाल फ्राई के वो तो आपके imported ही हैं. अगर उसके साथ वो
yeah.
चाय पी रहा है तो चाय के अंदर जो चाय जा रही है वो भी imported है, दूध पाकिस्तानी है और पानी पाकिस्तानी है. So, I think people miss that point as well when they look at import data and say, oh my God, हम ये इतना खर्चा कर रहे हैं, इतने अरब डॉलर
You,
हमने खर्च कर
you
दिए.
know, when we think of imports, the first thing that comes into mind is वो जो imported chocolates आती है or imported वो shampoo or lotions
और
or
cheese.
makeup आता है. Cheese. Oh my God, the worst thing the government has done is banning cheese because यहाँ की cheese is terrible and it's been 2 years and the cheese still sucks.
Yeah.
Like I'm not even exaggerating. So, if you want to do import substitution, you do it after you develop decent
Yeah.
substitutes.
I think someone was talking about how, there's like, I don't know how many $1 million worth of tissue paper imported into Pakistan. And I was like, that makes sense. Have you looked at the rose petal tissues? Usko खींचते खींचते ही वो फट जाता है. It's like, forget about using it for anything you need it to use for. उसको जब आपने डब्बे से निकाला है, तो by the time it reaches your face or whatever, it's done. Exactly. It's so crinkly, right? It just melts away the moment you touch
It,
it.
it, melt- it
There you go.
melted
It's in your
away.
hand. There you go.
It's
So I'm
it's not
like,
even there.
why would you consume that? You obviously are going to import better tissue paper because the one you have is crap. And no
Yeah.
offense to the rose petal people, but please improve the quality of your tissue paper, or at least offer a more premium product for others.
Mosquito repellent, mosquito
Yes.
coils. They're apparently they're luxury goods too. I didn't
Yeah.
know not wanting to die of dengue and malaria was something for the elite.
Yeah. Two big moments, Ariba, that come to mind from the year, that I want to get your thoughts on. First, what did you make of the budget at that time? And what do you make of the budget now that it sort of worked its way partially through the economy?
So the budget back then was too good to be true in the sense that they were trying like, yeah, we're promising you the world, and you knew that they're gonna go like, you know what, बहुत ज़्यादा हो गया, or हल्के आ जाओ. So now they're reconsidering their stance. So the budget back then was an extremely bullish budget. It was a budget that one would expect from a political party towards the end of their tenure. So it wasn't a surprise there. But
No,
at
no,
the
no,
end of
wait,
the
wait. Let me hold you there. I think it was a surprise for exactly that reason, because the political party is not at the end of its tenure. It still had at least one more budget to go before it entered election mode.
Yeah, but like you do know how things go, and you start your work 2 years before the elections.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they preempted, but sorry, go on with your thoughts on the budget.
You
I'll share
you
my
you
views.
you started, and plus आपसे finance minister कोई नहीं टिक रहा, क्या पता आप टिको ना टिको. But like my point is that the budget was like, we had and I feel that the budget was more like, during COVID, the relaxations through the IMF, whatever, we had those, and they were like, let's make the most of it for as long as we can. So it's like, a party in the Ministry of Finance and the State Bank, let's make the most of, the IMF going smooth on us and nice on us because of COVID. So they're like, we've got to make the most of it for as long as we can, because end में तो वापस program में जाना है और इंसान के बच्चे बनना है. So that was the budget. And
उससे
now
पहले
they
कि
are
टीचर की सीटी बजे कि
no
ब्रेक पीरियड
the
इज
teacher
ओवर, मजे कर लो
no
जो
no no
करना है.
no Uzair, the teacher was out of class. All right, the teacher was out of class, was like, listen, you're in charge, just make sure बच्चे ज़्यादा शोर नहीं करें, right? And you were having the time of your life, and now the teacher is back in class, is like, discipline.
And I guess in this analogy, the class monitor is the State Bank of Pakistan, जिसने कहा कि मैं भी जाऊं, मिल जाता हूं, जरा पार्टी करते हैं मिलके.
Prefect and monitor. Prefect is Raza Wagner, monitor is Shaukat Tareen.
उन दोनों ने कहा ठीक है, जो मस्ती करनी है करो.
And पीछे से जो है ना IMF जो है ना they're walking in, and everyone's like आ रहा है. The journalists are आ रही है IMF भागते हुए.
Yeah. No, that's true. I think I agree. I think the budget was too good to be true. I think my immediate reaction to this was that the numbers were just like off the kilter, right? Even PSDP का जो target था, वो अब उन्होंने 200 billion से तो cut कर दिया है. अभी थोड़ा और cut करना पड़ेगा because of borrowing costs going up, etc., etc. But I think it was only a matter of time before the whole stimulus worked its way through an economy that then was overheating, quote unquote. And now they are trying to walk back those comments. But I vividly remember, like, both Governor Bakir and Shaukat Tareen were here in Washington for the IMF meetings. And they openly said that our economy, our problem is too much growth at this point because it's coming close to 5%. And that's basically the cap, which is such a shame. Like, एक emerging economy, 220-230 million लोग, majority of them looking for better opportunity. आपकी top level growth ही 5% है बस. उससे आगे आप अगर जाएंगे तो you'll overheat and then all things will break loose. तो
But also the fact that they identified this is kind of, in a way, assuring, because the country has gone through a number of boom bust cycles. So, preventing, like, just pulling back at the right moment would maybe be able to
I don't
sustain
even
this.
think it's a boom. Like, Ariba, it's like a China bomb का वो पटाखा जो नहीं होता, वो फटता है और उसके बाद हालात खराब हो जाते हैं कि जी कुछ हो गया. Because I mean, look, I mean, comparatively to around the globe, when you call a boom, it's like several years of high
Yeah,
growth rates.
we don't have that.
कोई
We have like
8% ग्रोथ रेट 4-5 साल की हो, फिर बस्ट आए तो समझ आती है बूम बस्ट साइकिल है. ये तो एक साल की 4% ग्रोथ हुई, 3 क्वार्टर्स की तकरीबन 4.5 या 5% की ग्रोथ हुई और ओवरहीट हो गई इकॉनमी.
yeah, no, that's Pakistani boom bust.
हाँ.
You're right. The China पटाखा वाला boom, और फिर बच्चे आ जाते हैं, क्या हुआ वो वाला bust.
Yeah.
और
So
फिर
I
नहीं,
think,
एक बड़ा आ जाता है, बोलता है बंद करो ये पटाखे.
yeah, I think the budget really set the scene for what came later, right? And I think even to an extent, and we'll find more about the growth in money supply and its implications as well, over the course of time. But for now, there is another argument there. The monetarists are arguing that you also created too much money in the economy, which now is working through in the form of inflation and pressure on the currency, to which the state bank is pushing back very hard and saying that that's not really true. To which then my rebuttal is, if that's not true, then why are you raising interest rates? Because if this is cost push inflation and not caused by growth in money supply and etc., तो फिर CRR और पॉलिसी रेट बढ़ा के आप इन्फ्लेशन को कैसे काबू करेंगे, जिसका जवाब
नहीं,
नहीं है उनके पास.
if it was just the policy rate, तो बंदा बोलता कि चलो, all right, makes sense. But like, But okay, I don't buy it, but like, okay, let's see. But they also increased the CRR. And, and then, a few months from now, maybe we'll have the single treasury account as well. And that's also going to reduce liquidity as well. So when you take all of that into account, it's like the state bank knows that they've created a lot of
Yeah.
money.
And for those who don't know what CRR is, basically the reserve ratio that banks must hold. And if you increase the reserve ratio, then it basically means that
Yeah.
banks can't circulate as much money in the economy. That's the layman's explanation, basically.
So
But
the
essentially, it's a
last
means to
time
reduce money in the country.
they hiked this was in 2008, I guess, after the global financial crisis. So they hiked it right now. So just another, you
Which
know,
again is telling, right? Okay, you're taking measures that occurred last when the global financial crisis was occurring, but you're still arguing that everything is hunky dory.
yeah.
Which the narrative does not meet the eye, right? There's something
And
else going on here.
today's OMO operations as well makes one think
Okay.
that, how far the state bank is willing to go to make
Yeah.
people believe what they're saying.
I
Like
don't know if you
why?
saw after the OMO, I just woke up and got a message from Top Line.
Yeah, I got that.
Their closing paragraph was very interesting to me because they said the OMO has reduced yields, but resumption of the IMF program, current account deficit, and pressure on the rupee will determine yields going forward. So basically, Top Line is arguing in so many words that ठीक है शॉर्ट टर्म में आपने ओएमओ करके जरा थोड़ा मार्केट में स्टेबिलिटी ले आए हैं लेकिन दिस इज लाइक Panadol when you actually have like a much worse disease
Yeah.
on your hand and other things will determine what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's scary considering the fact that the state bank is not being taken as seriously as one would hope. And now they're going to have to walk the talk, not just say stuff. And the fact that the governor goes on to Bloomberg and says that we will not increase policy rates, and then you follow this up with the no more injection of 63 days. And based on data available since 2008, this has never been done. I guess the maximum was 17 days in 2011. This is unprecedented. And I hate using the word unprecedented because it's been used to death for the past 2 years. So this is unprecedented. And the state bank's been through a whole PR exercise trying to get the markets to believe it. And ye 2 mahine ke liye, maybe the markets will believe it. What are you going to do next after 2 months? How are you going
I
to calm
so
them down?
To me, the shocking thing in all of this, talking of state bank and central bank best practices, again, I'll put on my undergrad monetary economics 101 hat, right? You're a sophomore in college. You're what? I was 20 years old when I sat in my first monetary econ class, and the financial crisis was just beginning. We were all sitting in class actually living through. This was my undergrad
Wow.
experience, right? A monetary economics per day. And literally, the monetary economics playbook was being rebuilt at that time, right? With liquidity injections and TARP and whatever other programs that the Fed and the Congress pulled out at that time. And there was a debate because there was a big debate in the United States at that time about whether the Fed was crossing its congressional mandate given to it, right? Whether these programs were even legal or not. We were sitting in that class, and I vividly remember one of the early classes was how do you read a policy statement by a central bank? And
Yeah.
our professor basically told us that if there are 30 of you in this class, and if 30 of you read a policy statement and you all can't agree on what this means, then
Hmm.
we have a problem because
Yeah.
that's how volatility is birthed in the market because people can't understand what the central bank is trying to say or trying to do because what it says is an indication of what they're trying to do. But his other point was that once that decision is made, you don't speak that much. You speak through your policy statements, and that's it. So the fact that here we have a state bank that is releasing a policy statement, then goes on television shows to give a live interview, excuse me, for 40 something minutes, right? Other people are writing op eds, then goes on to Bloomberg and says there will be a rate pause. Clearly, the need for communicating this clearly in so many words that there will be a rate pause is because your monetary policy statement was unclear about what you're trying to do. And I had this debate with a friend because one friend of mine read the statement as they will pause rates. And my
Yeah.
reading of it
So
was that they won't because
everyone
there's an opening here.
So when the statement was out, the forward guidance that they gave, When I got comments, 3 people were like, "Oh, this means that rates are going to remain stable for the near term," and some people are like, "Oh, so this basically means the state bank doesn't want to go on record, but like anything can happen." So that happened, and despite their attempt at forward guidance, I just guess the market didn't take it as serious enough. And maybe they didn't take it serious because you're trying too hard to communicate a point. And I don't know, I feel that in such cases, when you talk too much, they sense that you're panicked, and then the market starts to react to that panic.
Also, the language in this particular statement was problematic in the sense that to me was like, what the hell is a monetary policy setting? Like ये क्या
Yeah,
कोई नई चीज आई है मतलब कहाँ से आई? और दूसरा वो एक एक दो जगहों पे लिखा हुआ था कि the monetary policy committee felt that blah blah blah. And I'm like, भाई
yeah.
feelings पे आप नहीं काम करते, आप monetary policy statement लिख रहे हैं, it's data driven. तो आप मतलब
Felt
felt क्या होता है?
the market's reaction was unwarranted.
हाँ तो ये क्या होता है फेल्ट क्या होता है मतलब आई डोंट
मुझे
अंडरस्टैंड
मुझे ये समझ नहीं आ रहा. The state bank is known for making calls to bank treasuries. All right, that is how they control the dollar back during Nawaz Sharif's, era, Dar's era, basically, as finance minister. So the state bank is known to do that. Why are they not calming the markets down through those calls now?
या
Like
सो आई मीन
like not in the FX market, like in the bond market. Why aren't they using that means now? I just find that weird. And a 63-day long OMO operation, kind of interesting.
yeah so we'll see I think you and I will both agree that they have a credibility challenge on their hands now, and this scorched earth media approach, as one of our friends refers to it, is not working, and it shouldn't. They shouldn't be doing this. They're hurting the credibility, at least in my view, of the institution itself, because central banks and central bankers don't speak that often. This is why there are conspiracy theories around central bankers about Illuminati and all sorts of stuff, because they don't keep a public profile, right? And they only come out and do something publicly and speak about it when they need to achieve larger goals. Like I remember in the US case when the back of inflation was broken in the 70s by these massive interest rate hikes. And that was, a way of the central bank to say, we're serious, we mean what we're doing, we're going to end inflation. And they did so by action again, not just by talking. They just hiked interest rates in a way that the market was like, holy crap, like this guy is serious, right? Like we need to see what he's doing. But I think they have a problem on their hands now. But let's see where things go. What do you think about the other thing I want to talk about? Towards the tail end, obviously things are bad right now. I don't know if you saw the former FBR chairman's comments or his presentation at Hamdard.
मुझे मुझे ज्यादा समझ नहीं आती वो बोलते क्या है. Okay, so I sometimes I think that Shabir Zadi is too smart for me to understand because I just don't understand what he's saying. So the funny thing is, I was at an event. It was a book launch a few days ago, and wahan pe there was this reporter there, and I was like, "Why are you here?" Like I was there as a favor to friend, but I was like, "Why are you here?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm here because Shabir Zadi is here, and he's gonna say something dumb, and I want to catch it before he says it." Perfect.
All right. So last question before we wrap things up. Mini budget is coming. IMF aa raha hai, nahi aa raha, pata nahi kab aa raha hai. Board meeting is scheduled. We'll find out more in the next few weeks. 2022 outlook, where do you see things going? And let's not do the whole year outlook because I know there's a lot of things up in the air. But let's just say first quarter 2022, where do you see things going?
All right. So the mini budget's going to be really interesting because now we find the government in a tougher spot. So there's that. And in order to decrease inflation, they're going to use some fiscal controls as well. So that would be interesting to see as well. But I doubt the government would want to use fiscal controls because again, I don't feel the government is too keen on the state bank using monetary tools as well at this point. But we'll have to see what happens on that front. As far as 2022 is concerned, ek to mujhe yakin nahi aa raha ki 2022 aa gaya. I just feel that 2021 repeat hoga, in the sense that I just don't think we had a year called 2021. but 2022 का ये है कि I feel that inflation will start subsiding by the end of the quarter, maybe if global commodity prices do start to taper down. But I don't know. I see 2022 first quarter being roughly the same. I don't see our remittances growing a lot because travel has opened up significantly. So that is one thing that I don't see happening. Secondly, I think our exports are going to remain range bound. They're not going to drastically go up. Our imports, on the other hand, are increasing, and I see them increasing further. So the current account deficit is going to remain a problem. Other than that, the rupee, I don't see the rupee massively losing, but also I don't see the rupee gaining strength. I don't see it strengthening. Make what you will of that statement. Uh, so yeah, things will be broadly stable, but like if they're stable at a bad time, is that really a good thing? It's just that what I'm trying to say is I don't see them becoming terrible from this point, but also I don't see them becoming good.
Yeah. No, I mostly agree with you. I think the one thing to watch out for will be how money supply growth works its way through inflation and the increase through the mini budget, the increase in taxes. Um, so I think that's all I would add to it. I think from my view, what the state bank is doing, and they will not openly say, nobody will openly accept it. This is just my theory, and people are free to disagree and tell me that I'm full of crap. But basically, what the IMF is doing through the state bank by hiking interest rates is constrain and impose fiscal discipline on the finance side, because the prefect is not disciplined, so the class monitor is saying ke beta line mein aa jao, right? Or something of that sort. The teacher and the monitor are colluding essentially.
But
And then
Uzair, one thing, I'm sorry for cutting you off. One thing, we thought Shaukat would not make it this year.
yes, but then we also said that if we are saying that हम जो कहते हैं उसका उलट होता है, तो that's also
Ah,
a pattern there as well. Uh,
I think Shaukat will make it this year. But I'm
yeah,
not saying the ulat, I'm saying I think Shaukat will make
yeah.
it till the budget.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, और है कोई नहीं पीछे तो किसको लाएंगे, right? That's also another
Asad,
point.
repeat Asad Umar again.
Yeah. So, but I think the fiscal discipline part is missed in the analysis. Again, from a theoretical perspective, that's the only reason why I think rates are being hiked. Okay? The idea being that if you raise hikes, if you increase interest rates, the cost of borrowing for the sovereign will go up. Interest rate expenditures will go up, meaning that he will not have, he being Shaukat Tarim will not have enough money to spend on other things, thereby imposing fiscal discipline by interest rates hike. No one will accept that, but I think that's the only logical way in which interest rate hikes here work through to curb inflation, because they will stall government spending and stop the flow of money in the
So,
economy the way it's
so
happening right now.
essentially you're saying कि वो जो meme था जो two पैसे ने बनाया था about Raza Bakr with a gun like shooting money out, that's basically Shaukat now shooting money out and Raza Bakr is like stop
Yeah, basically. And then
because the
they're trying
IMF
to,
tells him to.
yeah, because they're trying to impose fiscal discipline. I think, and I heard this from Shaukat Tarim himself when he was here in Washington. To me, what's concerning was he was just like, we'll spend on this, we'll spend on that, we'll spend on this. And I was like, at some point you gotta stop spending, buddy. Like you're gonna like unleash a monster of inflation by spending all the way through. Like you can't run big fiscal deficits in this situation. And I think that's the only logical reason to me, beyond the fact that the state bank accepts that it has created too much money supply in the economy, and that's what's causing inflation and pressure on the exchange rate. But on that
They think
note,
they created just a little more than it was required, not a lot, just a little
yeah.
bit.
And we will pause the rate hikes for now. That's how we calm the markets down, by going on Bloomberg these days to tell them what we're going to do in January. But that's for January. We'll see what happens between now and then. But Ariba,
और
thank you.
कितने op-eds आएंगे
हाँ, कितने op-eds, कितने interviews, कितने tweets वगैरह वगैरह. We'll see. The state banks
maybe
pushed its
TikToks
हाँ,
Maybe TikTok.
टिकटॉक ऑडियंस डिफरेंट है ना, व्हाट्सएप फॉर बिजनेस ग्रुप बना देना चाहिए. आई थिंक दैट्स द वे टू कम्युनिकेट फॉर द
Don't
राइट
don't don't
ऑडियंस.
don't give ideas. Don't give ideas. Don't give ideas.
एसबीपी का एक नया ग्रुप आ रहा है व्हाट्सएप का, प्लीज ज्वाइन करें, लिंक नीचे डिस्क्रिप्शन में, नहीं अभी तक नहीं आया है. बट अरीबा, थैंक यू
This
फॉर
just कितने से
ज्वाइनिंग.
बात होगी. हाँ, thank you so much for having
I
me.
know that you were not feeling well, so I really appreciate you taking out the time. I hope everyone enjoyed this roundup, and this is the last episode of this season. We will be back in January, so thanks for tuning in. And Ariba, once again, thank you for taking out the time.
Thanks, Uzair. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.